Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Minister, thousands of individuals and families throughout Ireland are this week receiving letters from the Revenue with an estimate of their liability to pay the local property tax. Many of these families are struggling as it is on very low incomes. Many simply can't pay their mortgage on a monthly basis, but they are expected to pay up the property tax nonetheless. The Government has decided that families with a gross weekly income of anything above €480 per week are not even allowed to defer the property tax liability, and anyone who genuinely cannot afford to pay is hit with an 8% penalty interest per annum. This tax is deeply unfair and fails, Minister, in any meaningful way to take into account the issue of ability to pay. We learned today that 7 out of the 8 people living in unfinished housing estates who were exempt from the household charge last year are now going to have to pay this property tax. The number exempt living in unfinished developments has spectacularly dropped from 43,000 to 5,000, simply because the Minister for the Environment instructed local authorities to go into every single unfinished development in the country and identify the houses that should pay and the houses that shouldn't pay. What people want above all else, Minister, is fairness and consistency. We now have a situation where one family living in an unfinished housing estate who's lucky enough to have a footpath outside the door and maybe even a public light that works will have to pay the property tax. But another family around the corner in the same estate who might be looking out on a heap of rubble on what was supposed to be a green area will now get an exemption. That is a ridiculous scenario, Minister. The Minister for the Environment is using a report, the National Housing Development Survey report, to justify the dramatic drop in the number of people who are going to be allowed to avail of an exemption. But when you look at that report, Minister, it cites that there are about 1,100 unfinished developments in the country that are in a seriously problematic condition. That is the term used within the report, and in order to qualify as being in a seriously problematic condition, the report cites exactly what has to be wrong within the estate, and the estate will want to be in a pretty bad condition to qualify. But the issue is not all of those 1,100 are now going to be exempt. In fact, the Minister has decided that a little over 400 of those 1,100 estates are going to have any exemption at all, and within each of those 400 estates, it's only going to be certain homes. That is blatantly unfair, Minister. And can you justify the enormous discrepancy between the number of estates that are cited as being in a seriously problematic condition and the number of exemptions that the Minister has now decided to grant?
Minister.
Well, essentially, Ceann Comhairle, it relates to two things. It relates to the improved performance in finishing previously unfinished estates, and secondly, it relates to the application of a standardised nationwide methodology of assessment. The Deputy knows well the background to the property tax. He ought to, given that his party authored it. And the purpose of it is to broaden the tax base so that the government can avoid putting additional taxes on income and people at work. And in terms of fairness and consistency, it wouldn't be fair, I'm sure you agree, Deputy, that some citizens would have to pay property tax and others would be exempt. Now, the Department of the Environment assures me that they have gone through the estates one by one and have taken decisions in respect of the current standard of estates. I mean, I presume that you will accept that, you know, if phase 4 of an estate is not commenced, and very probably will not be commenced in my lifetime, whatever about your lifetime, it's wrong to categorise that as an unfinished estate. So the criteria established are there on the website to see. The essentials that must be complied with are transparent, and as you say, it reduces the number of unfinished developments that will be exempt to 421. The application of the tax across the board has to be efficiently collected. And for that reason, the government, having regard to assessment of the efficacy of previous collection systems, has allocated that responsibility to the revenue, and the revenue will enforce the law.
Deputy McGrath.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ciarán Comhairle. Minister, I won't use the limited time that I have to go into the politics of this and to go into the politics of the promises made by Labour and Fine Gael that you would not be proceeding with a tax on the family home, because that's there for all to see. I raised.
Sorry. There's a limited amount of time available. No, please, quieten down. There's a limited amount. Please, the deputy has a minute. No, hold on. This is the debating chamber. He's entitled to his point of view, whether you agree with it or not. The Minister will have a chance to respond.
Ciarán Comhairle, here again this morning, we're seeing another reason why it would be absolutely futile to elect another government backbench TD in Meath East next week, because this is what we get every morning when the opposition are asking legitimate questions. I raised a specific question with you, Minister, and the question concerns the decision of the Minister for the Environment to essentially disregard the report that he is using to justify as the basis for the reduction in the number of exemptions. The report cites that there are 1,100 unfinished developments in the country that are in a seriously problematic condition, and it cites issues of lighting, water supply, wastewater, road not being to at least base course level, no footpath, open space. It isn't easy to get into the category of being described as seriously problematic. This is based on the returns by the local authorities. They are saying that there are 1,100 estates that are in a seriously problematic condition, and yet the Minister has cut that down to 400, and even within each of those one of 400, only certain householders are being exempt. So you can't say it's based on the report when clearly it is not. There is a grave inconsistency and unfairness running through the entire way this property tax is being introduced, and we have yet another example of it here this morning with the way that people who are unfortunately living in unfinished developments are being treated.
Thank you. Minister.
Ciarán Comhairle, I don't see how Deputy McGrath thinks that he can leave politics out of it. The reason that we have the unfinished estates is because of the chronic mismanagement that went on under the Fianna Fáil-led government.
Ministers didn't do anything wrong.
That's the reason.
Sorry, would you hold on a second? Hold on. The Minister is entitled to respond to Deputy McGrath. Would you please afford him the opportunity to do so?
That's the reason that we have the legacy of unfinished estates. And, you know, it's very difficult to listen to Deputy McGrath bleeding for the citizens out there when his government authored the property tax and made it a condition that now must be implemented to comply with Troika funding. It was a Fianna Fáil proposition. They were in favour of property tax then, and now, because they're in the middle of a by-election, they pretend to be opposed to it. The report from which he quotes is out of date. The report was completed last summer. The situation worked out since between the Department of the Environment and the local authorities have gone through the list of estates one by one and have decided certain criteria, like, for example, where installation and commissioning of public lighting, provision of potable water supply, provision of wastewater collection, treatment and disposal systems, access roads to at least base course level, including where required, provision for parking, provision of access to the dwelling by constructed footpath, provision of open space capable of serving as amenity needs or permitted developments. So they've gone through the criteria and have decided that there are 421 developments that do not comply with those standards. And in that case, those 421 developments will be exempted. But otherwise, the local property tax, which Fianna Fáil brought in, will be implemented because it's a requirement of the funding arrangement with the Troika.